Subscribe for more mysteries, unsolved and unexplained.
Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to dive right in today because we are looking at one of the absolute most tragic and honestly perplexing mysteries in the entire history of the National Park Service. We're talking about the 1969 disappearance of a young boy named Dennis Martin. But, as we're going to see, this specific case, it's really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the incredibly eerie phenomena happening out in the Appalachian Mountains.
So let's just jump straight into the core of the mystery here. What makes the Appalachian Mountains so uniquely dangerous? Like, why do so many people, and we're talking everyone from complete beginners to hardcore seasoned hikers, why do they just vanish without a single trace in these ancient woods? Well, by breaking down the Dennis Martin case, we can actually start to spot a pattern of strange events that completely defies logic.
Part 1. A game gone wrong.
Okay, so our story begins on Father's Day weekend back in 1969. 3 generations of the Martin family. You've got Father William, Grandfather Clyde, 9-year-old Douglas, and our focus, 6-year-old Dennis, who is literally just days away from his 7th birthday. They're on an overnight camping trip at Spencefield. Now, Spencefield is this 200-acre meadow right on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. It's sitting at roughly 5,000 feet above sea level, and the edge of this meadow is intensely rugged. We're talking surrounded by dense mountain laurel and impossibly thick rhododendron bushes. And it was right in this beautiful but super dense environment that the kids came up with what turned out to be a really poorly planned game of hide and seek.
Now, look at how staggering this timeline is. At 4:30 p.m., the game starts. The older kids want to sneak up on the adults. But because little Dennis is wearing this insanely bright red shirt that would instantly give them away, they tell him to go hide by himself around the far side of the field in the bushes. His dad actually watches that red shirt disappear into the tree line. Just 5 minutes later, at 4:35, the older kids jump out, surprise the adults, but no Dennis. At 4:40, William calls out for him, and Dennis was known as a highly obedient kid who always came when called, but there is zero answer. The family immediately spreads out and frantically searches the meadow. By 6 p.m., daylight is fading, the temperature is dropping, and utter panic has set in.
Part 2. The sickening scream.
Right at the exact same time the Martins were realizing something was horribly wrong, this completely bizarre event was unfolding exactly 7 miles southwest of them, near a spot called Sea Branch. A local guy named Harold Key was out there having a picnic with his family, and sometime between 6 and 6:45 p.m., so just a couple hours after Dennis vanished, Harold heard this scream that literally haunted him for the rest of his life. He described it as enormous and sickening and fundamentally wrong. He said it definitely wasn't an animal, and this is a guy with decades of mountain living under his belt. But it also didn't sound like a human in distress. It was just something else entirely.
And this is where things get really weird. Minutes after hearing that horrifying scream, Harold and his family saw a man literally burst through the brush. But this wasn't some weekend hiker. They described him as an unkempt, wild man with hair past his shoulders, dressed in completely torn, filthy clothes, looking like he'd been surviving rough in the woods for months. He was moving incredibly fast, like he was chasing something down or being chased himself. But the detail that gives you chills, over his shoulder, the family saw him carrying something that looked like cloth or clothing. As soon as this guy realized the Key family was watching him, he immediately changed direction, darted deeper into the forest, and was gone.
Part 3. The unprecedented search.
Meanwhile, back up at Spencefield, it's totally dark. Grandfather Clyde actually hikes 9 miles down the mountain in the pitch black to get help. And right then, a massive storm hits, dumping 2.5 inches of heavy rain in just 3 hours. A literal deluge that almost certainly washed away any tracks Dennis might have left. But the response? It was immediate and absolutely unprecedented. Over 1,400 volunteers flooded into those mountains to find the boy. And it wasn't just local hikers. The FBI opened files and heavily trained Green Berets, guys fresh from Vietnam, joined the hunt.
These massive crews systematically scoured 56 square miles of the Great Smoky Mountains. I mean, think about that scale for a second. 56 square miles of incredibly dense, steep, unforgiving terrain being combed over by thousands of people, all desperately trying to bring this 6-year-old home. The official search ground on for 16 grueling days. But tragically, the sheer size of the response kind of became a double-edged sword, because you had so many well-meaning people, soldiers, volunteers, locals, trampling all over the wet, muddy ground. They almost certainly destroyed a massive amount of physical evidence without even realizing it.
Part 4. The impossible footprints.
Okay, so 3 days into this massive search, they finally find a piece of physical evidence in the mud near Eagle Creek, which is several miles away from where Dennis went missing. And it is incredibly confusing. Searchers found a specific set of child-sized footprints. The left foot was totally barefoot, but the right foot clearly showed the tread of a boy's Oxford shoe, size 2.5, which, yeah, was the exact brand and size of shoe Dennis was wearing. These tracks led straight toward the water, and then they just stopped. They didn't loop back, they didn't slowly fade out, they literally vanished right at the water's edge.
And the debate over these footprints is still wild today. Park officials, incredibly, completely dismissed them. They claimed, oh, it must have just been an older Boy Scout who is part of the search party. But retired Ranger Dwight McCarter, who obsessed over these prints for decades, called that out as nonsense. He pointed out some massive logical gaps. First off, absolutely none of the searchers, Boy Scouts included, were running around looking for a kid barefoot, obviously. Second, the tracks led away from the search grid, not toward it. And lastly, McCarter said the stride showed clear purpose and direction. It was not the random, wandering stumble of a panicked, lost little boy.
Part 5. The Appalachian Anomaly.
Ultimately, the official search failed. Dennis Martin simply ceased to exist at 4:30 p.m. on June 14, 1969. They never found a scrap of his bright red shirt, and no remains were ever recovered. He tragically became a grim statistic. And this brings us to the real takeaway of our explainer today. Dennis Martin's disappearance isn't an isolated fluke out there. The Appalachian Mountains generate more unexplained phenomena per square mile than literally anywhere else in North America. People just vanish from spots where it shouldn't even be physically possible to get lost. You have highly trained tracking dogs inexplicably losing strong scent trails, acting like the person just evaporated into thin air. And you have incredibly experienced survivalists found deceased in bizarre, completely inaccessible locations that completely defy geography.
So why does this matter to us? Well, if you ever plan on hiking or visiting these stunning but super imposing mountains, you've got to understand what you're walking into. Some locals and researchers chalk all these terrifying anomalies up to what they call thin places. The idea is that a thin place is a localized geographic zone where the strict, normal rules of our reality just bend, or even break entirely. It's a theory used to explain how a person could be standing right there one second and completely erased from the universe the next.
Which leaves us with a truly haunting thought to wrap up this explainer, one I want you to really think about. It was physically impossible for a 6-year-old boy to travel 7 miles through dense, mountainous rhododendron alone in just 2 hours to get to where that wild man was spotted. There's just no way. So if little Dennis Martin couldn't make that journey himself, what exactly carried him into the dark? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember to always stay curious.